Flying flimsy wooden biplanes with no radar, guns, or parachutes, these Soviet women dropped 23,000 bombs on the Nazis, and became the only female unit in history to terrorize an army into giving them a supernatural name, the Night Witches. In 1941, the Soviet Union bled. Nazi tanks churned the earth to mud, and the Red Army's pilots were falling faster than their planes could be rebuilt. Stalin, cornered, signed a desperate order: form the 588th Night Bomber Regiment. Women, barely out of school, some still teenagers, answered the call. They weren't given sleek fighters or heavy bombers. Their weapons were Polikarpov P2s, rickety crop dusters built of wood and canvas, meant for dusting fields, not waging war. Open cockpits exposed them to the Russian winter. No radios, no armor, just a compass, a map, and a stopwatch. Training was brutal: 6 months of navigation drills under moonlight, learning to read the winds howl over the creak of their fragile wings. By October, they were ready, or as ready as anyone could be, climbing into planes that smelled of varnish and fear. Their first missions were chaos. The women flew at night, navigating by the faint silver of moonlight on rivers and snow. The P2s chugged at 80 miles an hour, so slow a strong gust could stall them. Hands froze to metal controls in -40 degrees Celsius, skin peeling off like wet paper when they pried their fingers free. Bombs, small and crude, were slung under the wings or clutched in the navigator's lap. Some were thrown by hand, the women leaning out into the screaming wind, canvas wings shivering like scared birds in flak bursts. Nazi searchlights slashed the sky, pinning the planes like moths. Bullets tore through fabric fuselages, and the stench of gunpowder mixed with frozen sweat in the cockpit. Every mission was a gamble: one spark could ignite the wooden frame. Yet they flew, night after night, learning to thread through anti-aircraft fire like needles through cloth. The witches found their edge in silence. They called it the silent death. High above Nazi camps, pilots cut their engines mid-flight. The P2s, light as kites, glided soundlessly, fabric wings whispering over sleeping soldiers. No roar, no warning, just the sudden whoosh of firebombs tumbling from the sky, erupting in gouts of flame. Tents burned. Ammo dumps exploded. The Nazis woke to chaos, firing blindly at shadows. The women restarted their engines mid-glide, the sputter of the P2s fading before the enemy could aim. One night, a single pilot, Nadezhda Popova, flew 18 missions. Land, reload, launch, 8 minutes on the ground, bombs stacked by trembling mechanics, then back into the black. Her plane groaned under the weight, canvas ripping in the wind, but she flew until dawn, her hands numb, her eyes burning from smoke. The Nazis began to whisper of ghosts, of broomsticks sweeping the sky. They executed their own men for wasting bullets on these specters, convinced the witches were something unnatural. Dawn landings brought no relief. One morning, a mechanic ran her hand along a P2's underbelly and froze. Blood, thick and frozen, coated the floorboards. Shrapnel had torn through the navigator's legs mid-flight. She'd said nothing, flown on, and died in her seat. The pilot, shaking, hadn't noticed until the wheels touched dirt. The women buried their own, often in secret, scratching shallow graves in the frozen earth. They lived in dugouts, coffin-sized holes carved into the steppe, lined with straw that smelled of mold and despair. A pilot's diary, ink smudged by frost, read, "We sleep in coffin-sized holes dug in frozen earth. Yesterday, we shared one potato between 5. Food was scarce, sleep scarcer." The women stitched their own planes, patching bullet holes with canvas scraps, their fingers bleeding from needle pricks. Yet they sang, low and defiant, their voices carrying over the wind, "We are wings, we are night." The Nazis learned to dread the sound. Not the engines, but the absence of them. The silence before the fire. They called the 588th Nachwechsen, Night Witches, because no mortal women could fly like that, could vanish like that. Superstition spread like frost. Soldiers swore the planes moved without sound, that the women cast spells to cloak themselves in darkness. One night, a P-2 was caught in a searchlight's glare. Pilot Marina Raskova, her plane riddled with holes, stood on her seat, hair whipping in the wind, and hurled bombs by hand as tracer rounds lit the sky around her. She landed with half a wing, her navigator coughing blood, but the target, an ammo depot, was ash. The Nazis doubled their bounties for downed witches, offering iron crosses to anyone who could hit a ghost. The war ground on, and the witches paid in blood. Of the 80 women who started, 30 would never see the end. Some burned in their planes, fabric and wood igniting like tinder. Others fell to flak, their P-2s spiraling into the dark. One pilot, caught in a searchlight, dove deliberately into a Nazi fuel dump, her plane a fireball that lit the horizon. The survivors flew harder, their planes patched so many times they looked like quilts. They dropped 23,000 bombs, destroyed bridges, trains, entire encampments. Their deadliest weapon wasn't courage, it was the Nazis' own fear of witchcraft, paralyzing soldiers who heard the broomstick sweep of their wings. By 1945, the witches had flown over 24,000 sorties, their names whispered in awe by their own and terror by their enemies. Victory came, but not glory. In May 1945, as the Red Army marched in Moscow's Victory Day parade, the Night Witches were told to stay behind. Their service, their sacrifice, was deemed unsuitable for women. No medals, no fanfare. They burned their flight logs to keep warm, their names fading into the ash. Years later, in the 1970s, the survivors gathered in a small room, their faces lined, their hands still calloused from those freezing controls. They sang their old anthem, "We are wings, we are night," their voices cracked, eyes glinting with memories of moonlight and fire. Some wept for the 30 who never came home. Others laughed, remembering the whoosh of bombs, the way the Nazis ran from shadows. They were old now, but in the dark, they still heard the wind over canvas, the silence before the strike. The Night Witches flew no more, but their legend clung to the sky. In villages near old battlefields, people still spoke of broomsticks and ghosts, of women who turned night into fire. The Nazis had feared them, not for their planes, but for what they proved, that courage could outfly steel, that silence could scream louder than guns. Their P-2s, flimsy and slow, had carried them through hell, and the world would never forget the sound of their wings.